Yes, folks, The Outsiders recently interviewed Michael Shellenberger, a renowned environmentalist who exposes the idiocy of renewable energy, such as wind and solar, and who also exposes the rank hypocrisy of the climate change preachers. But first, what's going on with these woke folk in Sweden? Apparently, more and more of them are refusing to fly these days because of carbon emissions. And even one woke greenie politician named Pa Anders Holmgren travels every week to the European Parliament, which is 1,370 k's each way. So this guy is paid by the taxpayer to sit on a train for about 48 hours a week. Now try and figure that logic out. Now anyway, now to some more hypocritical woke folk.
Other major embarrassment to the royal family involves Prince Harry and his new wife, former American actress Meghan Markle. Both are global warming preachers. Markle, for instance, included warming guru Greta Thunberg on the cover of the Vogue edition she guest edited. And Prince Harry last month announced that he'd have just 2 children to save the world from global warming.
It's a wonder they didn't just follow the other woke folk like Madonna and Angelina Jolie and adopt African babies.
Is too much. But the couple are now under media attack as hypocrites because they've since taken 4 private jet flights in 11 days to goof off on the Mediterranean, including flights in a jet owned by Sir Elton John to stay in his villa in Nice. Joining me from London is one of the sharpest political and cultural analysts I know, Brendan O'Neill from Spike. Brendan, it's great to see you. Can you tell me, why does it matter that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry fly around in their friends' private jets to go on holidays on the Mediterranean?
I think it really matters. I think it matters because it exposes the staggering hypocrisy of the new green elites and the kind of woke lobby. You know, there's all this stuff in the British papers, among the British chattering classes. They're constantly saying that all the criticism Meghan Markle gets is because she is black. And that's completely untrue. You know, they turn everything into a race issue. The truth is that Meghan Markle and Harry are getting a lot of criticism because at the moment they epitomise, they typify that kind of elitist, posh, rich, woke person who thinks nothing of lecturing the masses about how they should be behaving while behaving very differently themselves. So, as you say, they were spouting from, you know, the pulpit of Vogue magazine just a couple of weeks ago about how we all need to save the planet. Now they've taken 4 private jet journeys over the past week to swanky holiday resorts. You know, these people are hypocrites and people are tired of being lectured to by supposedly woke elitists.
Well, on that hypocrisy front, I mean, it's odd that Markle admires Greta Thunberg, who at this very moment is sailing to the United States rather than fly because she says, you know, global warming gases. And yet Markle herself at the very moment is taking private jets for her holidays. I mean, the hypocrisy is just so in your face.
It's so in your face. And, you know, the funny thing, of course, is that there are now reports that Greta Thunberg's trip to the US is not as green as she would like us to believe, because apparently the owners of the boat are going to have to fly out 5 or 6 people in order to sail the boat back to Europe. And, you know, I saw a report that's been, you know, in the European press about how Greta Thunberg's journey, if she had just flown by plane, it would have actually saved more carbon than if she'd gone in this boat that has to be followed up by all these crew people on airplanes. But
rank hypocrisy, folks.
you know, the thing is that what Greta Thunberg and Meghan Markle do have in common, even if they do things slightly differently, is this instinct to tell people off, you know, really to look down their noses at the rabble who are presumed to be this kind of polluting mass of people, constantly making the wrong decisions, having too many children, driving polluting cars, going to supermarkets, eating the wrong food. I think what we're seeing is the emergence of a kind of neo-aristocracy, a green neo-aristocracy that thinks nothing of lecturing the public, and the public has had a gutful of it.
Have they ever? And the UN's IPCC is now telling us to be vegans. Yes, to be vegans to save the planet. Yep, that's on its way here, folks. Now to the Outsiders interview.
Let's go to Mike Shellenberger. He's been on Outsiders before. He is, of course, the founder of Environmental Progress. He's an environmentalist, a scientist, an author, and we're delighted to have him again to talk to us about renewables, about nuclear energy, and give us some actual facts and science on what is the madness of the climate change religion. Welcome back to Outsiders, Mike Shellenberger. How are you, Mike?
Good, thanks for having me.
Good to see you again, mate. Now, listen, you've been writing quite a lot recently, particularly about nuclear energy. Suddenly, since we last spoke a few months ago, that debate has heated up here in Australia with certain politicians saying, well, hang on, maybe we should be looking at this. So tell us just briefly where we are at the moment with renewables in Europe and what you think of what's happening in Australia.
Well, renewables are running into a crisis situation in the countries that were the first to pioneer the use of them. So what we've seen in both Germany and California is a problem of both too much solar and wind electricity when we don't need it, not enough when we do need it. The German wind industry is actually in a crisis right now. They've lost about 24,000 jobs over the last year or so. Only 1/3 of the new wind auctions were actually sold to bidders. And the reason is because there are lawsuits and local opposition that are blocking new transmission lines and wind farms because they're having such a negative environmental impact, particularly on a really spectacular bird species, the European red kite. And it's a similar situation in California, and it's actually happening in Australia as well. There's actually 2 endangered Australian birds that are threatened by wind farms right now. So this is one of the great ironies, is that those of us that have dedicated our lives to protecting the natural environment find ourselves opposing the expansion of a technology that was supposedly good for the environment, but has turned out to have some of the biggest negative ecological impacts.
Yes, that's exactly the same with everything they try. Wind farms scar the landscape and solar panels use up thousands and thousands of acres of land.
Talk us through those, particularly the larger birds and the threat to them. The environmentalists in Australia and the lefties have all gone, oh, no, the odd occasional bird maybe, but they've dismissed it. We've heard all sorts of figures about what is at stake with bird life. Talk to us about the threat of windmills.
Well, this is really quite scandalous. I mean, I was an advocate for wind turbines for many years, and I told myself, I repeated the propaganda that I had heard, which is that, oh, well, house cats kill more birds or more birds fly into buildings. That's just false. Cats might kill robins and sparrows and jays, but the big, spectacular, high conservation value birds, the birds that are endangered or threatened, the ones that take many years to reproduce, those birds don't get killed by house cats. Eagles kill house cats, as it actually turns out. And you have 2 species of endangered birds actually in Australia. We're doing a report on this that should come out in the fall, but the orange-bellied parrot and the Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagle are both threatened by wind farms. And it's major green leaders in Australia, major environmental activists that are raising these concerns. And once again, though, our concerns are being dismissed by this big lie, which is that house cats are somehow some major threat to eagles or even parrots. It's quite ridiculous.
I wanted to ask you about Germany and France, the different approaches they've taken in terms of nuclear and renewables. Talk us through that, because there's an enormous figure that Germany is going to be spending upwards of 580 billion by 2020, and yet their energy prices are soaring.
That's right. I always say that all you need to learn about energy and the environment, you can learn from Germany and France. And it's an important case study because it covers many decades. So just one statistic, Germany spends almost twice as much for electricity that produces 10 times more carbon pollution than French electricity. The Germans have seen their electricity prices rise 50% over the last decade. And like you said, Germany will spend $580 billion by 2025 on renewables, and we'll need to spend another $3 to $4 trillion to get solar and wind to 100%. And, you know, people think that Germany's mostly renewables. It's actually only 35% renewables, up from just 7% 10 years ago, and they're running into huge challenges. I mean, the biggest are the environmental and economic ones. But you can see it's a brilliant case study because Germany has been phasing out nuclear, trying to do renewables. France has stayed with nuclear at 75% of its electricity mix. And here they're actually the world climate leader and the world environmental leader, and they're doing it with nuclear power.
Yeah, that's irony, isn't it, folks? The world leader, an environmental leader, is doing it with nuclear power, the power source that everyone hates, all the greenies hate.
But Mike, one of the things that you've written about, I think, very eloquently in Build the Cat, so to speak, or not the house cat that's killing the eagles, but just cats in general, is that for the environmental movement, actually the economics don't matter. And in some ways, ideologically, the idea that the power prices are going to go up and that a consumer lifestyle is harder to achieve is actually a feature, not a bug. Can you talk to us a bit about that deep green ideology?
Well, yeah, I mean, you hear it all the time. I mean, I've traveled all around the world. I interview small farmers in the poorest countries in the world.
This part's very interesting, folks.
And I've never heard any of them say that we all consume too much or there's too many people. But here in my hometown of Berkeley, or when I travel to rich parts of Europe or Australia or New Zealand, I hear it all the time. People say the rest of the world can't live like us. And there's something wrong with our lifestyle. I find it really disturbing because it's often claimed like, oh, well, we'll all do our part. But of course, the people that are saying it fly around the world in jet airplanes. They go to conferences to complain about other people becoming prosperous. And so I think that really what it's about is it's about actually trying to keep other people down. Yep. This is what it's been about since the 40s and 50s. All of that concern about, oh, there's too many people, that was always directed at poor people, non-whites, in poor and developing countries. And you see it now, they're using climate change to basically deny poor countries modern energy. It started with hydroelectric dams and nuclear plants, but now they're seeking to deny poor countries in Africa, Latin America, Asia, the basics of oil and gas, coal, all the ways in which we have achieved this amazing standard of living. You see people trying to stop other people from having that standard of living in poor countries.
Yes. So isn't that the very definition of racism, folks? Stopping Africans, for example, having the same standard of living that we do? Yeah, now folks, for those who don't know, The Outsiders can be seen on Sundays on Sky News Australia, and it most certainly isn't mainstream media.